Hello, my name is Kayleigh Hopkins, and my thesis is that the West's view of beauty has a detrimental impact on females. I would like to start by thanking you judges for being here and for reading my paper. And I would also like to thank the parents who had set up this event for us. All right, let's begin. Quote, "It hurts to be beautiful" is the cliche I grew up with. "It hurts not to be beautiful" is a truth I acquired on my own, end quote. Deborah L. Rode, a legal scholar, expressed this sentiment when writing her article on society's preoccupation on appearance. The West's view of beauty has a detrimental impact on females. Beauty standards are a socially constructed view that people should conform to certain parameters in order to be considered attractive and to be accepted by society. Over the years, standards of beauty have varied as people strive to conform to these ideals. In my thesis, I explore the numerous sources of influence, the harmful effects, the unhealthy amount of attention on a woman's physical appearance, and finally, the ways in which people can combat the negative messaging and mitigate its impacts. Concerning beauty, there are a vast amount of influences, including the film, fashion, and modeling industries, social media, performing arts, and other media-related causes. Those portrayed within the media are the ideal, and if one doesn't fit within those ideals, they aren't considered to be attractive by society. Children and teens are influenced to internalize society's messaging, which continues throughout their life. With the media so easily accessible to many, standards of beauty have resulted in numerous negative effects. Such results include negative body image, poor mental health, eating disorders, and the drastically increased number of unnecessary cosmetic procedures. While all of this has become more widespread and more common, the same cannot be said about the awareness and knowledge about this issue. The West's view of beauty has produced harmful consequences on females all around the world. Awareness must be spread and the negative impacts understood so that all will be able to understand society's messaging, the ways in which they are influenced and affected, and their own internal judgment. Thank you.
Thank you for picking this topic. This is a very difficult and challenging topic, and you've covered a lot of ground in 27 pages. And I appreciate the hard work that went behind this. The topic is difficult for two reasons. One, because it is what I call as a soft topic. It touches the core of a person when you read it and when you pick to research it. So first, I applaud your courage to pick a topic like this, especially in a culture like ours where it is challenging to even converse on topics like these because there's so much under the surface. So first, thank you for giving me the opportunity to read and go through this paper. Those are just my opening remarks, and then I'll have some comments and questions following. Go ahead.
I was also really impressed by your topic. It's extremely important, and it's something that's been a problem in society forever. And somehow or other, I think it's gotten a little bit worse instead of getting better. When we talk about being more accepting of differences, but I think under the surface, things haven't really changed. In fact, in some ways, I agree with you, it's gotten worse. So I applaud, along with my fellow judge, your courage in tackling this. It's huge. Your opening statement that it hurts to be beautiful, could you explain that a little bit more, how it hurts, in what ways it hurts?
Yeah, so I would say it's something that I've heard myself a lot too, and that people have kind of thrown around a little bit when it comes to like making themselves beautiful or dressing correctly or applying makeup to, whatever it takes to look beautiful. And when they're like, oh, I don't want to do that, they're like, maybe it's a friend or a parent that'll be like, it hurts to be beautiful, like deal with it or something like that. And so I found this quote from an article, and when she said, it hurts not to be beautiful, is a truth I acquired on my own. I realized that that's so true. And yeah.
So do you specifically mean physical pain?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever think a little bit about the pain that it might cause to be beautiful?
Yeah.
The emotional
definitely,
pain?
Definitely. Is that what you're asking? Like
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's something physical and emotional as well. So I don't mean, just physical.
You titled the paper Perception, and then throughout the paper you talk about standards. So if the paper is about perception, how are you anchoring the whole paper on standards?
Right, so I would say that beauty can be subjective in everyone's eyes. However, the standards that society has placed on each and every one of us influences those subjective opinions and views on beauty. And so that is why I talk about the standards and as well as the perception, because they kind of intertwine in that way.
So standards are emerging out of perception versus reality or facts, and that is why
Right.
your thesis is that standards and perception are two separate things, or are they interrelated, or should we relate them?
Yes, they're interrelated, I would say.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is I want to understand a little bit more behind what you went through as you wrote this paper in terms of standards and perception. Because to me, those are very separate concepts and almost at odds at each other. So I just wanted to get a little deeper on. If you can explain to me, how did you arrive at using standard in the paper, that particular word, and then, okay. So as you deal with this tension between the word standards and the word perception, because in my opinion, they are two separate concepts. They don't mix well together. You can't relate them easily. So how did you deal with that tension as you were researching? Because you will come across perception oriented content a lot as you look through the research you have cited. I found it hard to look at, that's a perception, or that's an observation, that's an opinion. But here is a standard. When we say something is a standard, that's a very rigid word. Something that leads to a standard goes through a lot of inspection, scrutiny. Like I'll give you an example, the standard code for a building. This building has a code, and then that becomes a standard. It goes through a lot of scrutiny. I don't think beauty related standards go through the scrutiny like you are using standards of beauty often. So I'm trying to figure out how you deal with a lot of tones of perception in the research that you have cited, the examples you have given, the actions that teenagers take or actions that adults take, that are all driven by perception, not by standard. You see, and throughout the paper, we are discussing standards. We are attacking standards. And so I'm trying to understand, why did you pick the word standard, and what went through your research and your analysis that led you to say, you know what, I'm going to zero in on this concept that we want to dismantle in the society pretty much.
Okay, so I chose the word standard because it's been made clear to me that there are standards, and those standards have influenced people's perceptions of beauty. So, like I was saying before, everyone has kind of their own perception of beauty based off of their cultural values or how they've grown up. And so, when it comes to the standards, those people are influenced into it kind of changes their original concepts of beauty into thinking that these standards of beauty are what is beautiful to them, because they're influenced into that, easily influenced into that, yeah.
So if I understand your answer, I want to make sure my understanding is correct. What you're saying is there are standards, they may not be as rigorous or rigid as we understand the word standard to be, but that's what ends up happening. People we have diluted the word standard when it comes to beauty, whereas the standard should be something else. And because we don't have proper standards, that leads to wrong perceptions about beauty. Or should it change the standards of beauty?
Should the perceptions change?
Should the standards change?
Should the standards change? Yes, they should, but I don't think there's an ideal way or a realistic way for standards to change. I mean, they do change over time, but there's no way for standards to completely go away.
You mentioned the influence of social media on society's beauty ideals. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I went over it briefly in my paper, mainly because there were a lot of different influences that I wanted to include. But with social media is actually a really large factor when it comes to how it affects people. And these people who promote these beauty ideals on social media hold a lot of influence on those people who look at it, especially since the majority of people who have social media are adolescents, right? And so they are easily persuaded into thinking that what they see is the ideal. Is that what you were asking?
Sort of. I just wanted more information. You didn't cover it as deeply as some of the other influences on our perception of beauty. And I just wanted to know more about your thinking on that. Because there's a huge flap about the use of social media and what it does to, especially teenagers and preteens.
Right, yeah.
So, and in slightly related, what do you think a family's influence is on our perception of beauty?
Families definitely hold a lot of influence, especially when an older sibling or parent has experienced similar messages from society or who have negative perceptions about their own body. And if they are verbal about it, that can affect children and the people around them into having their own negative body image. And so definitely families can not only influence them, but they can also kind of perpetuate it. And so that's where it's seen in families, yeah.
One other question that's also slightly related. 5 or 6 years ago, the company that makes Barbies introduced Barbies with different body types. And I have not heard another word about it since they were released. Did you run across any of that in your research?
I did not, no.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out what happened and whether that's had any influence.
Definitely.
I know they have a lot of multicultural Barbies and Barbies with physical disabilities and Barbies from different cultures and all that, but the fact that they bothered to try to introduce Barbies with different body types other than that super elongated, unrealistic, nobody looks like that in real life, model they've had. I was just curious if you found anything about that.
I didn't find anything about the new released Barbies from a few years ago. I do remember hearing about it at that time, but in my research, I did come across some Barbie-related sources, but first of all, I haven't even seen any new Barbies, rather than the old ones, or rather than the older ones, and I didn't find any research on the new ones either. Yeah, I don't know if that's helped in any way or if people have been buying those Barbies. I don't really know. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas how the problem can be not necessarily solved but helped? How we can redirect people's thinking?
Yeah, I think that there are a few steps that people can take personally and for themselves as each individual, which will not only benefit them but the others around them. And I think the first step would be to, first of all, recognize this issue as it is and see it as it is, because many do not. Secondly would be to learn how it can affect them or how it has affected them and how they can perpetuate it as well. And then third, I would say, would be to look at it from a different perspective, because outer appearance has been placed as the highest form of beauty when it comes to a person. And we know that God created us with beauty in mind, inward and outward beauty. But us as humans have kind of twisted that into seeing the outer appearance of a person as what is most valued and what is most important. And I think that people don't completely recognize that inner beauty really is the most important and should be valued. The disposition of a person is what God sees in us and what we should see in one another as well.
Thank you.
So what you just said, those 3 lines, you should have put them in the paper. Right? That is the centerpiece of your argument, which is we need to change the standard. That's why I picked on that word, standard, before. We need to change the standard from what humans have defined to what God has defined. So if there is one revision, if you could make to your paper as you analyze this session and you'll think about it and the questions that were asked. Challenge yourself, whether it is this paper or in future, what is the anchor of whatever you would write? And if that anchor is God and God's word, then you want to be confident and you want to be sure to put that as the anchor and then defend it through your writing.
You quoted a verse from Samuel at the end.
I didn't.
And
Yes.
I think what it needed was a little elaboration, which is why I asked you the question.
Another question I had, page number 10, you give an example of the orchestra and how they evaluate performers who may want to be hired or join the orchestra. They chose to put them behind a curtain, right? Is that an acknowledgement of the fact that if we see the person, we can't perfectly judge the ability, or is it the right thing to do? Is putting the person behind a curtain the right thing to do?
I would say it's not the right thing to do. The example that I placed in the paper, I wanted to prove my third point, which was that there's an unhealthy amount of attention on women's physical appearance, and people can judge a woman based on her looks. And so when that girl was auditioning for the orchestra, they put her behind the curtain, right? Because they didn't want her looks to influence or stand in the way of like her true talent. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but I think that just proves that they understand that this could influence them. But yeah, it's not the right thing to do.
This is my area of education and training. And the Vienna Philharmonic was notorious for not allowing women. And they didn't start allowing women until the mid-90s. That's really recent. I mean, that orchestra has been around for a couple hundred years or longer. And a lot of orchestras are very overpopulated by men, and the attitude toward women musicians was, it's okay if they play at home. That's part of being a cultured woman, but we don't want them in public. Or thinking that women can't possibly play as well, or that women shouldn't play brass instruments. It's okay if they play violin and piano, but they're not supposed to play trumpet or trombone or be percussionists. And those are really difficult things to overcome. And to my way of thinking, the Vienna Philharmonic starting blind auditions was a huge step in the right direction. And I understand your point that it's a shame that they had to do that in order to be objective, but I think it's a step in that direction. And hopefully at some point, blind auditions won't be necessary, won't matter to anybody whether someone who is playing is male or female. But right now, and especially then, I mean, that's like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I think it was the only choice they had. When you have an old, established bunch of leaders in the orchestra, and the directors, the people who choose the new musicians, they needed to do something. So, but I understand that it's a shame that that's what it took. And it's a shame that people are still doing that to this day. They even put carpeting out so you can't tell from the footsteps on the stage whether it's a man or a woman. So it's pretty extreme at times, but it's better than not allowing women at all.
The reason why I asked that, thank you for elaborating. The reason why I asked that question was, again, that was one of your challenges in the paper, where you had opportunity to take this topic on and actually point out the fact that it is not right to do this. The real recovery of where we are as a society is not to put a woman behind a curtain, but actually to allow her to perform in whatever way she is comfortable performing, to demonstrate her ability. And it is the people evaluating her that need to change, and not the person who is performing. And I think that's just to make a note of. You will come across a lot of such strong examples in your future research as well that will help support your argument. You have to figure out what is the real issue here. So thank you for citing that example. You often switch between physical and mental in the paper, or psychological and physical. You often go back and forth through those two big concepts, and physical actions lead to mental implications, or physical opinions or decisions or thoughts or views, perception, whatever leads to psychological damage or effects. I'm curious what led you to do this ping pong between physical and psychological versus just dealing with one. Let me just deal with physical, or let me just deal with psychological.
That's a good question. I wanted to show pretty much everything that people can deal with when it comes to this issue, because I don't think a lot of people completely realize how impactful this can be, and so that's why I wanted to deal with both the physical and the psychological effects, because there's so many people that struggle with both, and I feel like if I only focused on one, then it would leave out a big chunk of what people really struggle with.
So if I understand your answer correctly, you're saying they're so interrelated that you couldn't leave one out. You had to talk about both of them.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, but again, I want to thank you for tackling such a difficult subject.
I have a few more, but
Go.
okay. This is a very important topic, and I thought it's not just you standing there answering questions or explaining your thought process. It's people behind me that are listening and that are absorbing and it's my hope and prayer that we will go away from this session thinking more deeply about this topic. So thank you again for taking the questions. So when it comes to therapy, and you cite one person, one practitioner again and again, why did you just choose that, or there was only one that you found and you couldn't find 5 others?
So one of our assignments for our senior thesis was to find a professional, or to find someone in an area that we can benefit from and use their knowledge in our paper. And so I interviewed a family and marriage therapist, and so we just had like phone call, and so that's why I used a few of her quotes in the paper. She was really helpful, and I learned a lot from her. So that's why I kind of used a lot of her, just because she was someone I had talked to. Yeah.
With respect to therapy itself, you have talked about how therapists help, right? Did you find in any of your research how therapists might actually hurt and not help?
I did not. No, I didn't look at that. That would have been a good research idea, but I did not get into that, no.
How many revisions did the paper go through?
Probably like 3. 3, yeah, I would say.
And how many total hours did you take for you to from start to finish?
I don't even know. A lot.
50? 100?
Probably, yeah. I didn't keep count.
You didn't keep count?
No.
The reason why I'm asking this is, as you'll get through your next stages of life and career and whatever you choose to do, whether you choose to make a home, which is a career, or you choose to work outside the home, which is a career also. You want to pick an area that you devote yourself, invest yourself in, and then you keep track of how much energy you are putting in it, how many hours you are putting in it, the cost you are willing to pay. And that will help you see the fruit of your labor in a different light. It will help you as a woman, as you will go into the world, to listen to your voice more and say, look, I am working hard because I'm passionate about this. And I'm willing to not sleep because I'm passionate about this. That's why I asked that question. On the overall paper, if you had a version 17 to write, what would you improve the most? In other words, let me clarify. What do you think were the weakest part of the paper, and what were the strongest part of the paper?
I think my strongest part was probably my first proof, which was the influences and the effects that it could cause. And yeah, I would say that was probably my strongest, because I think I did the most research on that. I really wanted to dive deeper into the facts on that. And I would say what I would like to improve on if I were to write this again, I would say probably my conclusion. I think that for the time being, I concluded it like I wanted to. I think that I now have a better idea of how I could bring it all together, if you know what I mean. So that's probably what I would work on.
My assessment, thank you for being self-aware in that area. My assessment of those two areas is, first, of course, awareness. You nailed it. So congratulations on that. You made me more aware of these aspects of beauty. And in terms of improvement, I think just stopping at awareness could have been fine too. That would have been even more impactful, where you just said, my goal is to raise awareness and let the tension of awareness hang there with the readers, and not rush to therapy or solutions, which again, I understand the structure is challenging you to do that. Again, congratulations on a very good paper, very thought-provoking paper, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.